All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into a legal case that, honestly, it feels like it's straight out of a movie. We're talking about a murder plot planned out in detail and caught, word for word, on a police wiretap. So, that one sentence, "blap him right in the field," recorded by police, that's not just a smoking gun, it's what kicks off this whole legal drama that ends up testing the very definition of what a fair sentence even is in the Canadian justice system. Okay, so let's rewind the clock to where this all started. December 4th, 2008. The police are in the middle of this massive surveillance operation, and they're about to hear something that's going to put a pretty deadly plan into action. And it all starts with just one text message to a man named Jeremy LeBlanc. And here's the thing. LeBlanc has absolutely no idea he's the main target of this thing called Operation Intrude. I mean, his Chevy Blazer is bugged with a listening device. He's got a GPS tracker on it following his every move. Meanwhile, the guy he's planning to hit, James Melvin Jr., he's also being watched, but much more openly, with cops just visibly monitoring him. And this is where it gets kinda wild. The whole plot gets set in motion by the target himself. James Jimmy Melvin Jr., who also goes by Mad Dog, sends this text to LeBlanc. He has no clue that he's basically walking right into a trap that he himself just helped set up. So you've got to picture this. LeBlanc's in his car, thumbs flying, texting back and forth, trying to lure Melvin to a meeting spot. At the exact same time, he's talking with his buddies in the car, planning the ambush out loud. The police are getting a real-time play-by-play of the whole thing. And, I mean, you can just hear the confidence on the tape, right? The wiretaps catch LeBlanc literally boasting about his plan to ambush Melvin in a field behind an apartment building, in a quiet neighborhood. In his mind, it was totally 100% foolproof. Okay, so the trap is set. LeBlanc is feeling pretty good about himself. But as we're about to see, even the most perfect plans have a way of unraveling, and fast. And man, this all went down in just a matter of hours. That first text leads to a couple of phone calls. And get this, in one of them, you can actually hear the chilling sound of kids playing in the background, because Melvin was calling from a daycare. By early evening, Melvin's been shot. And then, just a few hours later, LeBlanc gets arrested, not while he's hiding out, but while he's just casually shopping at a future shop. And when the dust settles, the aftermath tells the whole story. Melvin survived, thankfully, but he was badly hurt and completely unarmed. The police found 6 shell casings, a stray bullet that actually went into a nearby apartment, and the real kicker, gunshot residue all over LeBlanc's hand. His so-called perfect plan left behind a perfect trail of evidence right back to him. So, faced with this mountain of evidence, including, his own voice on tape planning the crime, Jeremy LeBlanc really had no choice. He pled guilty to attempted murder. But that is where this story takes a really interesting turn. It stops being about the crime and starts being all about the sentence. The judge came down hard, 16 years in prison. But this is where his lawyers did something pretty clever. They didn't fight the guilty verdict, no way. Instead, they focused all their firepower on the sentence itself, arguing that the way it was decided was just wrong. These zeroed in on 3 very specific legal arguments. First, did the judge focus a little too much on just punishing LeBlanc and sending a message? Second, did he do the math right when it came to credit for time already spent in jail? And third, and this is the big one, was the whole legal process actually fair? So, let's actually break these arguments down, because this is where we get a really fascinating look at how the justice system checks its own work to make sure things are being done by the book. So that first argument, yeah, it pretty much hit a brick wall. The appeal court looked at the facts, a cold-blooded shooting planned in a residential area, and they said, yeah, the judge's focus on denunciation, which is really just the court's way of saying society is outraged by this, was totally justified. 16 years was a fair sentence. The second point, the one about the math, that didn't fly either. See, back then, it was pretty common to get 2 days of credit for every 1 day you spent in jail waiting for trial. The judge only gave LeBlanc a 1-for-1 credit, but the appeal court said, nope, that's fine. The judge can do that, especially since LeBlanc committed this crime while he was already out on bail for something else. But that third argument, the one about procedural fairness, well, that was a whole different story. It wasn't about the crime. It wasn't about the sentence length. It was all about one single moment during the hearing that brought up this huge question of what's truly fair. And boom, this is it. This is the key to the whole appeal. The judge, completely out of the blue, brings up this idea of delaying LeBlanc's parole. But the Crown prosecutor, the government's lawyer, immediately shuts it down. Says, nope, we didn't consider it, and we're not going to argue for it. So you think, okay, that's that, right? The Crown isn't asking for it, so the judge will just drop it. Wrong. The judge went ahead and delayed LeBlanc's parole anyway, and that one decision ended up being the single thing that made the whole appeal successful. And what's so wild is that later on, during the appeal, even the Crown admitted this wasn't fair. They basically said, look, once we said we weren't pursuing it, the defense had every reason to think the topic was dead. If the judge still wanted to consider it, he absolutely should have told the defense lawyers and given them a chance to argue against it. He didn't. So here's the final verdict from the Court of Appeal. The 16-year prison sentence, that was upheld. It didn't change. But that order delaying his parole until he'd served half his sentence, that got overturned. It meant LeBlanc was still going to serve a very long time, but now he'd be eligible for parole at the standard 1/3 mark, not the extended 1/2. Now, I know what you might be thinking. This sounds like a tiny legal victory, a technicality for a guy who was, without a doubt, guilty of a terrible crime. But it actually highlights one of the most important principles in our entire justice system. So why does this one little procedural point matter so much? Because the justice system has to play by its own rules for everyone, no matter how guilty they might seem. It's not enough to just get the right outcome. The process of getting there has to be right, too. It's all about making sure people can trust that the whole system is fair. And ultimately, this whole case, from the wiretaps to the courtroom, really boils down to this one simple but incredibly deep question. It forces us to look past the details of just one crime and think about the integrity of the justice system as a whole. And it's a powerful reminder that even when someone is clearly guilty, the rules of fairness still have to matter.